The sky did not break, and there were no thunderclaps. The arrival was silent, a corruption of the static between the stars. One moment, the orbital monitoring stations saw nothing. The next, they registered a distortion, a lensing of starlight, as if space itself had taken a deep, anxious breath. Then, they were there. 72 geometric vessels, each the dull gray of a spent bullet, materialized in a precise grid at the edge of the solar system, just beyond the silent orbit of Neptune. They did not announce themselves with flares of exotic energy or radiant displays of power. Their presence was announcement enough. A cold, digital signal pierced the quiet of the void, aimed directly at the pale blue and its single, cratered moon in a secure briefing room buried deep beneath the Namsan mountain in Seoul. Hyun stared at the translated text on the panoramic screen. The air was cold and smelled of recycled oxygen and fear. Around him, the voices of the United Nations Emergency Council crackled through speakers, a cacophony of panic, anger, and desperate questions in a dozen languages. The message was simple. It was a standard template used by the Juron hegemony for millennia. It spoke of assimilation, of the benevolent order of the hegemony, of the honor of joining a greater galactic community. It demanded the unconditional surrender of Earth's planetary governance and military assets. The alternative was not stated. It did not need to be. The fleet, designated a pacification array, was the alternative. Hyun, a career diplomat in his late 40s, rubbed his tired eyes. His suit, usually impeccable, was wrinkled. He had been in this bunker for 18 hours straight. On the screen, the alien ultimatum ended with a timestamp, 24 standard cycles. 24 hours, said a French delegate, her voice trembling. They give us 1 day to decide the fate of our species. What is there to decide? Countered a Russian representative, his tone gruff. We cannot fight that. We must negotiate. And say what? Hyun asked, his voice quiet but cutting through the noise. He leaned into his microphone. We have nothing to negotiate with. They see our fastest ships, our most powerful weapons, as children's toys. Our nuclear missiles would be firecrackers against their shields. We are not bargaining from a position of strength. We are begging. The screen split, showing live telescopic feeds of the alien fleet. They were moving now with a slow, terrifying inevitability, crossing the orbit of Uranus. Their speed was impossible. Shrugging off the laws of physics humanity had just begun to understand. Hyun's personal tablet buzzed. A secure message from the Korean intelligence director. It was a personality profile, scraped from linguistic analysis of the alien transmission. The hegemony commander's name was Kale. His record showed the pacification of 7 other worlds. His psychology assessment read, confident, uncurious, culturally arrogant, views technological inferiority as moral inferiority. Uncurious, Hyun muttered to himself. That was the key. A curious enemy might study you, might find something of value, might hesitate. An uncurious enemy simply erased you to tidy up the map. The council voted, as Hyun knew they would. They drafted a message of peaceful intent, of a desire for cultural exchange, of humanity's uniqueness and potential. It was a beautiful, desperate plea. Hyun felt a hollow shame as he approved its transmission. It was the message of a lamb asking the wolf to consider vegetarianism. The reply came in minutes. The main screen flickered, and an image resolved. Commander Kale of the Juron hegemony was humanoid, but stretched and severe. His skin had a metallic sheen, and his eyes were large, black, and devoid of warmth. He did not sit on a throne of bones. He stood on a clean, functional bridge. The terror was in the normalcy. People of Earth. Kale's voice was translated into flat, precise English. Your transmission is noted. Your culture is irrelevant. Your potential is unproven. The galactic hegemony brings order. Your current state is chaotic, pre-sublight, and prone to conflict. You will be ordered for your own benefit. He paused, his head tilting slightly. Your attempt at diplomacy is a primitive mimicry of logical discourse. You have no leverage. You have only a choice. integration, or oblivion. Your 24 cycles begin now. Do not waste them on more noise. The transmission cut. The silence in the bunker was absolute. The Russian representative was pale. The French delegate was crying silently. Then, a new voice, calm and analytical, came through a secondary channel. This is Dr. Mira at the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute. I am observing the fleet's energy signatures. Go ahead, Doctor, Hyun said, grasping at anything solid. Their formation is not just tactical. It's ceremonial, Mira said. Her face appeared in a corner of the screen. A woman in her late 30s, with focused eyes and hair tied back neatly. She looked exhausted but alert. They are arranged in the hegemony's Parade of Dawn formation. It's from their historical texts. It is what they use when they believe resistance is impossible. It is meant to display absolute dominance before a demonstration. A demonstration? Hyun asked, though he dreaded the answer. Typically, Mira said, her voice tightening, they use a low-yield orbital pulse on the largest moon or a nearby barren planetoid to show the destructive power at their disposal without damaging the primary biosphere they intend to harvest. The council erupted again. Hyun muted his microphone. He looked at Myra's feed. How do you know this, Doctor? For a moment, she hesitated. I studied preliminary contact scenarios, based on hegemony patterns. Hyun knew she was lying. He could see it in the slight flicker of her gaze. But he also saw something else. A flicker of knowledge, not just fear. Understood, Hyun said. Thank you, Doctor. Please continue your analysis. He cut the public feed and sent a private, encrypted text to Myra's terminal. Your office. 1 hour. This is not a request. Hyun, UN Security Liaison. He looked back at the main screen, at the frozen image of Kale's dismissive face. The uncurious enemy. The ceremonial formation. The ticking clock. A cold, hard knot of an idea began to form in Hyun's stomach. It was not a plan. It was the ghost of a memory, a piece of forgotten history from his own time in black-budget oversight. A file on an anomaly, a relic on a distant rock. A project called Guardian's Echo, buried and abandoned because its purpose was a terrifying mystery. He stood up, ignoring the shouting voices from the speakers. The path of begging had ended. It had ended the moment Kale had called their plea noise. Now they had 24 hours, not to find a way to surrender, but to find a way to make a warning that even an uncurious enemy could not ignore. And for that, he needed the woman who had just lied to the United Nations. The drive from the bunker to the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute was a journey through 2 different worlds. Above ground, Seoul was shrouded in a tense, eerie quiet. News of the ultimatum had leaked as it always does. The streets were not chaotic, but subdued. People moved with a strange haste, their faces drawn, eyes glued to phones or looking nervously at the sky as if expecting it to crack open. The silence was worse than any riot. Below ground, in the secure, sterile corridors of the Institute, the panic was of a different kind. It was the panic of numbers, of physics, of cold, hard reality. Scientists and junior officers moved with rushed purpose, their voices low, filled with the terminology of doom. Kinetic impact estimates, gamma-ray burst probabilities, planetary shield theory. All of them concepts they now knew were hopelessly inadequate. Hyun was escorted to a secluded lab, away from the main activity. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of multiple data screens. In the center, Dr. Mira stood before a large, interactive display showing the solar system. The alien fleet was a cluster of red dots now passing Saturn. Their speed was a constant, terrifying counter on the screen. She did not turn around when he entered. Liaison Hyun, I assumed you would come. You lied to the council, Doctor, Hyun said, closing the heavy door behind him. The sound echoed in the quiet room. I told a simplified truth, she replied, finally turning. Her calm from the broadcast was gone. Up close, she looked exhausted, her eyes shadowed. Telling them the full truth would have caused a different kind of panic. A useless one. What is the full truth? Hyun asked, walking to stand beside her. The display showed not just planets and the invaders, but faint, almost invisible markers scattered through the outer solar system. One, near the frozen dwarf planet Sedna, was pulsing a very soft blue. Mira took a deep breath. 5 years ago, a deep space mineral survey probe on Sedna found an anomaly. Buried in the ice, perfectly preserved, was an object. It was not natural. It was not Juron. It was older, much older. She brought up an image on a secondary screen. It showed a black, smooth structure, vaguely like a twisted flower made of stone or metal. It had no visible seams, ports, or markings. It hummed with a faint, internal energy signature that defied all their attempts at categorization. "We called it the Watchmaker's Artifact," Mira said, "a name from an old Earth theory, the idea that a universe so precise must have been crafted by someone. This was the craftsman's lost tool." Hyun stared, a memory slotting into place. Guardian's Echo, the black budget project. I saw it on a non-disclosure list. It was shut down. It was buried, Mira corrected, her voice sharp. We studied it for 2 years. We learned 2 things. First, it is a gravitational lensing device of unimaginable sophistication. It doesn't create energy. It manipulates the fabric of space-time itself. It can pinch a point in space with such force that it creates a temporary, microscopic singularity. Anything within that point ceases to exist in our reality. It is erased. The word hung in the cold air. Erased. Not destroyed, not blasted apart. Erased. And the second thing? Hyun asked, though he feared the answer. We could not make it work, she said flatly. It was dormant. It responded to one thing, a specific quantum harmonic signal, a kind of key. We could not generate that key. It was like having a bank vault from an alien civilization. We knew it was powerful, but we couldn't crack the lock. The military lost interest. The project was deemed a fascinating, useless relic. Too dangerous to poke, too expensive to maintain. The station on Sedna was mothballed. The data was sealed. Hyun looked from the artifact to the red dots on the main screen. They were halfway between Saturn and Jupiter now. You think this artifact is the warning? The Guardian's Echo. It's the only thing we have that isn't a firecracker, Mira said, desperation seeping into her tone. Think about it, Liaison. An ancient, galaxy-spanning civilization, the Watchmakers, they placed this thing, and others like it, on the outskirts of young solar systems. Why? Not as a gift, not as a toy, as a boundary marker, as a landmine, a sign that says no trespassing. The Jurans are not curious. They bulldoze through boundaries without reading the signs. A spark ignited in Hyun's mind. The uncurious enemy. The ceremonial, arrogant formation. We need to read the sign for them. We need to make the landmine go off. Mira nodded, a grin set to her jaw. We need to find the key. And we have less than 22 hours to do it. Who else knows? Who can help? My original team. A few are still in the country. The best is Tae. He was the lead engineer on the artifact's physical interface. He is meticulous. He never believed we should have stopped. Get him. Get everyone you trust. I will secure a military shuttle to Sedna. It will be the fastest thing we've ever flown, but the trip will still take most of our time using emergency thrust. A shuttle? Mira asked, alarmed. We can't operate it from here? Hyun pointed at the artifact on the screen. You said it yourself. It's a boundary marker. Its effect is local for a weapon of its type. It has a limited effective range. We have to be there to aim it, and we have to be there to turn it on. The weight of the mission settled on them both. They were not talking about pressing a button from the safety of Earth. They were talking about a one-way trip to the darkest, coldest edge of the solar system to awaken a sleeping god they did not understand. Mira turned back to her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I will call Tae and the others. We will need to pull every byte of data from the sealed servers. We will need to rerun every harmonic analysis. As she worked, Hyun looked at the live feed of Earth. He saw his city, his country, his world, glowing softly against the black. He thought of the Juron commander, Kale, watching the same planet, seeing only a resource, a problem to be solved. An uncurious enemy. He opened a secure line to the bunker. This is Liaison Hyun. I am invoking Priority Directive Alpha. I need a Valkyrie-class fast shuttle prepared at the Jeju Island spaceport within the hour. Crew, myself, and a scientific team. Destination: Sedna. Authorization code is as follows. He recited the code, a string of numbers that granted him access to the planet's most secret assets. On the other end, there was a stunned silence, then a swift, acknowledged. It will be ready. He ended the call. Mira was speaking quickly into a headset. Tay, yes, it's me. Listen, we're going back. No, not in a year. Tonight. Get to Jeju. Bring everything from the old Echo Drive. Yes, everything. She looked at Hyun, her eyes wide with the reality of it. He's on his way. He says he never deleted the files. For the first time since the red dots had appeared, Hyun felt something other than dread. It was a thin, sharp sliver of purpose. They were not going to beg. They were going to try and read a sign written in the fabric of the universe. And they were going to hold it up, directly in the path of the oncoming bulldozer. Outside, the sky over Seoul remained dark and clear, dotted with familiar stars. The people below had no idea that a handful of them were now racing toward the deepest dark, hoping to find a single, ancient spark that could become a warning fire. The Valkyrie shuttle was not built for comfort. It was a titanium bullet designed for rapid deployment, not long journeys. Its interior was a cramped cylinder of cold metal, roaring engines, and the constant, heavy pressure of acceleration. Strapped into his seat, Hyun felt every vibration rattle his bones. The viewports were shielded. Looking at the blurred stars during such a brutal thrust would cause nausea and disorientation. So they sat in the loud, shaking dark, hurtling toward the edge of everything. Across from him, Mira and her engineer, Tae, were bathed in the glow of portable screens. Tae was a man of few words, his face calm and focused as he worked. He had arrived at the Jeju spaceport with a single, heavily shielded case, treating it with the care of someone carrying a sleeping infant. The key, Tae said, his voice barely audible over the engine's scream, is not a password. It is more like a song, a specific vibration that resonates with the artifact's core. Mira scrolled through cascading lines of quantum frequency data. We tried 11,000 simulated songs during the original project. Nothing worked. The artifact stayed silent. We were thinking like humans, Tae replied. He connected his case to the shuttle's power. Inside was a bizarre piece of technology, a blend of human circuitry and smooth, organic-looking components salvaged from around the artifact's burial site. We tried to force a resonance. The watchmakers did not force. They invited. He brought up a visual on his screen. It was the quantum signature of the artifact's dormant state, a complex, intertwined pattern of energy. It is not a lock. It is a sleeping mind. We must give it a reason to wake. A threat. Hyun leaned forward, the harness cutting into his shoulders. A threat? We're trying to wake it to make a threat. No, Tae said, his eyes never leaving the patterns. We must show it that the threat it was built to guard against is here. Now, we must show it the Jurans. The shuttle's pilot, a young Air Force captain named June, spoke over the intercom. Passing the asteroid belt. Thrust maintaining. Estimated arrival at Sedna's orbit in 9 hours. The fleet has just passed Jupiter. Speed constant. 9 hours. The Jurans were closer, moving faster. Time was a thin rope, fraying. Mira understood first. The artifact scans the system passively. It's been listening to the solar wind for millennia. We need to feed it the Juron fleet's energy signature, their shield harmonics, their drive pulses. The signature of an invasive, hostile force. But we need to package it in the right quantum envelope. The song isn't a melody. It's a report, an alarm.
Tae nodded.
Exactly. We must take what we see of them and translate it into the artifact's language. We must tell it. The trespassers you were set to watch for have arrived. For hours they worked, Mira used the shuttle's long-range sensors to capture every scrap of data from the distant fleet. Tay's machine hummed, weaving that data into complex quantum states. Hyun watched, useless in the technical work, but vital in another way. He contacted the UN bunker. He needed political authority. On a secure, lag-heavy channel, he faced the exhausted council. We have a potential solution. It is not a weapon we control. It is an automated response system. To activate it, we must send a final warning to the Juron commander. An official, planetary warning. It must be clear, public, and unequivocal. The Russian representative was furious. You want to provoke them? They will burn us sooner. They will burn us anyway, Hyun said, his voice flat from fatigue and G-force. This is different. This warning is not for them. Not really. It is for the system. It is a formality, a required step. He did not explain further. They would not understand, and there was no time. After a bitter debate, with the Juron fleet now a visible threat in Jupiter's orbital space, they gave him limited authority. He could transmit one message. Mira handed him a datapad. The translation is ready. The alarm song. As soon as we land, we can feed it to the artifact. But the warning, it needs to be broadcast. It will be the trigger for the trigger. Hyun composed the message. He chose every word with cold care. He thought of Kale's uncurious, dismissive face. He opened a channel on the widest possible band. A channel even primitive radios could hear. He did not speak as a diplomat. He spoke as a custodian. Attention, Commander Kale of the Juron Hegemony Fleet. This is Liaison Hyun of Earth. You are trespassing in a protected stellar neighborhood. You have ignored peaceful intent. You are now ordered to withdraw your fleet immediately beyond the orbital boundary of the Kuiper Belt. This is not a request. This is your final warning. Heed it. He sent the message. It raced ahead of them toward Jupiter, toward the arrogant formation of gray ships. The response was almost instant. It was not a private channel this time. Kale broadcast his reply on the same wideband, for all of Earth to hear. His translated voice filled the shuttle cabin, dripping with contempt. Protected neighborhood? Final warning. A dry, clicking sound might have been alien laughter. Your defiance is entertaining, but wasteful. You have no protection but your own ignorance. Observe the price of your false bravado. The screen lit up with new data. The Juron fleet shifted. 7 ships broke from the main formation in a graceful, terrifying arc. They moved toward Jupiter's largest moon, Ganymede. What are they doing? Mira whispered. They watched, helpless, as the 7 ships took position around the icy moon. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a synchronized pulse of blue light connected them, forming a ring of energy around Ganymede. There was a flash, silent in the vacuum but blinding on the sensors. When it faded, a new, perfectly circular crater, hundreds of kilometers across, glowed molten red on Ganymede's frozen surface. It was a surgical, effortless demonstration. A mere fraction of their power. Kale's voice returned, colder than the space around them. Your warning is noted and disregarded. Your time is reduced. You have 12 standard cycles to surrender. The next demonstration will be on your own moon, and the next on your cities. End your noise. The transmission cut-in the shuttle. The only sound was the deep roar of the engines. The demonstration was a horror, but it was also a gift. Myra's hands flew over her console. The energy signature, the shield frequency during the pulse. It's perfect. Tay, feed it in. All of it. The arrogance, the threat, the exact harmonic of their weapons. Tay was already working. The data from the Ganymede strike was integrated into the quantum song. The alarm was no longer theoretical. It was now a recording of the crime itself. Hyun stared at the image of the glowing crater on Ganymede. A moon scarred to make a point. His final warning had been mocked and met with escalated violence. Just as he knew it would be. The uncurious enemy had to be provoked, had to show its nature fully, for the ancient artifact to recognize the threat. He played his part, Hyun said. More to himself than anyone. Jun's voice came over the intercom. Tense. Approaching Sedna orbit. The research station is on the dark side. No power signatures. It's dead. On the main viewer, the distant, reddish speck of Sedna appeared, a lonely sentinel in the endless dark. The shuttle banked, and there it was. A small, dome-shaped station half buried in ice, dark and silent. Beyond it, the starfield was impossibly dense, the sun just a very bright star among millions. This was the edge. Here, they would either wake the echo or they would die here, waiting for the end to come to Earth. The shuttle's engines changed pitch, beginning the delicate maneuver to land on the frozen, airless rock. The final act would not be played out on the stage of Earth, but here, in the forgotten dark, with an audience of ancient, uncaring stars. The landing was a slow, careful fall into a tomb of ice. The Sedna research station had no atmosphere to stir, no wind to blow. The Valkyrie shuttle settled onto the frozen surface with a soft crunch, sending up a puff of ancient dust that fell back in perfect, slow motion. Outside the viewport, the universe was a silent, frozen painting. The sun was a distant, cold white pinprick. The only light on the landscape came from their own ship and the unmoving stars. Inside the shuttle, they suited up in heavy exploration suits. The process was slow and clumsy. No one spoke. The only sound was the hiss of oxygen and the click of seals locking. Hyun felt the heavy weight of the suit settle on him, both a protection and a prison. He looked at Mira and Tae. Through their visors, their faces were pale, their eyes wide with a fear that was no longer about aliens, but about what they were here to do. Captain June remained in the cockpit. Life support in the station is dead. I'll keep the shuttle hot and monitor from here. You have 10 hours until the fleet is in demonstration range of the moon. Good luck. The airlock door opened. There was no sound as it slid aside. One by one, they stepped out onto the surface of Sedna. The feeling was wrong. There was no up or down, only the suit's artificial gravity keeping their boots stuck to the grayish-red ice. Their movements were slow and dreamlike in the weak gravity. The path to the station dome was marked by old, half-buried guide lights, all dark. Their helmet lamps cut through the perfect black, creating long, dancing shadows. The station airlock door was frozen shut. Tae moved forward, a small thermal torch in his gloved hand. The blue flame was silent in the vacuum. He worked methodically, melting the ice seal. After several minutes, there was a groan transmitted through their boots as the door released. It slid open a crack, then stopped. They pushed it open enough to squeeze through. The interior airlock was dark. The outer door closed behind them, and they stood in utter blackness until Hyun found a manual override panel. A weak, yellow emergency light flickered on. The inner door opened into the main chamber of the station. It was a scene of paused time. Desks were still covered with pads and tools from 5 years ago. A half-finished drink bulb sat next to a monitor, frozen solid. The air was gone, stolen by leaks and time, leaving an absolute soundless cold. But at the far end of the room, taking up an entire wall, was the reason they had come. The artifact was not behind glass or in a containment field. It was simply there, embedded in the rock and ice the station had been built around. The black, twisted flower of smooth material seemed to drink their helmet lights, giving back no reflection. It was smaller than Hyun had imagined, about the size of a large car, but it hummed with a presence that made the silence feel heavy. Mira went straight to the main control console. She brushed ice crystals from the screen and began powering up the station's backup generators. One by one, lights flickered on, and a low, vibrating hum filled the station as ancient systems groaned to life. The air remained thin and unbreathable, but now they had power. Tae did not look at the artifact. He went to a large equipment locker, its seal still intact. He opened it and began pulling out cables and interface modules, the specialized equipment he had built to talk to the sleeping object. "Set it up," Mira said, her voice a tight whisper in the helmet comms. "I'm linking the shuttle's sensors. We need a real-time feed of the Juron fleet. The artifact needs to see the threat approaching, alive and moving." Hyun stood in the middle of the room, feeling utterly useless. He was a man of words and politics, and here, at the edge of everything, words were nothing. He watched Tay connect the bizarre, hybrid machine to ports on the artifact's base. The artifact did not react. On the main station screen, Mira brought up the solar system display. The red dots of the Juron fleet were a tight cluster now, passing the asteroid belt. Their projected path was a straight, ruthless line to Earth. A countdown clock on the screen showed the time until they would be in position to strike the moon. 9 hours, 14 minutes. Tay, Mira said. The alarm song. Is it ready? Tay finished the last connection. His machine glowed with soft internal lights. It is ready. But we have one problem. What problem? Hyun asked, his stomach tightening. The artifact's targeting, Tay said, turning to face them. His face in the helmet was serious. We were wrong to think of it as a gun. It is more like a reactive plate. It can only affect a precise area of space directly around it. A few hundred kilometers. To reach the fleet near Earth, we would need to move the artifact itself. That is impossible. The hope that had carried them across the solar system shattered. Hyun felt the cold of Sedna seep through his suit. Then this was all for nothing. We came here to activate a shield that only protects this rock. Not a shield, Mira said, her eyes locked on the fleet's formation. A reactive plate. It reacts to a threat within its range. She zoomed the display in on the Juron fleet. Look at their formation. The Parade of Dawn. It is tight, ceremonial. Commander Kale's flagship is in the center, with his closest command ships around him in a perfect geometric pattern. They are not expecting any threat, so they see no need to spread out. She turned to them, a fierce light in her eyes. We don't need to bring the artifact to them. We need to bring them to the artifact's effective range. That's impossible, Hyun said. They are heading for Earth. No, Mira said. They are heading for a demonstration. What if we give them a better one? What if the insolent, noisy humans who dared to give a warning are not on Earth? What if they are out here at the edge of the system still defiant? What if we tell them exactly where we are? Hyun understood. It was a gamble of monstrous scale. We bait them. We insult the commander personally. We make him so angry he detaches a part of his fleet to erase us first, as a personal lesson. And we lead them right here. Not apart, Tay said quietly, studying the artifact's dormant energy readings. The artifact's reaction, if triggered, it will be instantaneous and total within its field. We need the flagship. We need Kale. He is the source of the threat. The artifact will see the lead ship, the command signature. If we get him and his core guard within range, the song should target his entire formation. They were talking about pulling the tiger's tail while standing on a landmine. The plan was insane, but it was the only move left on the board. Mira began typing. I will send a tight beam message directly to Kale's flagship. No wideband. Personal insult from you, liaison. Something his uncurious, arrogant mind cannot ignore. Hyun thought for a moment. He thought of Kale's dismissive tone, his laughter. He knew what to say. He gave Mira the words. The message was short. It was not from Earth. It was from Sedna Research Station. It read, Commander Kale, your demonstration on Ganymede was impressive for a child with a new toy. A real power does not need to break moons to prove its strength. It simply is. We are here at the edge. You are not welcome in this house. Come and silence us yourself if your toys work this far from home. Or continue to bully rocks and hide behind your fleet. Hyun. They sent it. Then they waited. The silence in the dead station was complete. They watched the fleet's icon on the screen. A cluster of red death moving toward the blue dot of Earth. The countdown ticked down. 8 hours, 47 minutes, 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Maybe he is too focused on Earth, Tay said, his voice hollow. Then, the screen updated. 2 signals broke away from the main Juron fleet. Not 2, 10. A full squadron. Their vector changed, a sharp, aggressive turn away from Earth. Their new course was a straight, high-speed line across the solar system. Its endpoint was Sedna. Mira let out a shaky breath. He took the bait. He's coming himself. I'm reading the lead ship's signature. It's the flagship. Kale is leading them. The relief was instantly swallowed by a new, more immediate terror. The 10 red dots were moving with terrifying speed. The estimated time of arrival flashed on the screen. They will be here in 2 hours. Mira said, "Point 2 hours." They had 2 hours to wake a dead god and hope it understood their plea. They had just invited 10 alien warships to their exact location. There was no shuttle fast enough to escape now. They were on the landmine, and the bulldozer was coming straight for them. Hyun looked at the black artifact. It sat silently, a forgotten sentinel. He hoped it was still on duty. The 2 hours felt like 2 minutes and also like 2 lifetimes. Every action became frantic, yet every second stretched out, thin and brittle. The station's power was fully online now, humming a tense song that vibrated through the frozen floor. The main screen was a split image. On one side, the 10 red dots of the Juron detachment blazing across the dark map toward Sedna. On the other, a cascade of swirling data from the artifact itself. Tae was at his interface machine, his hands moving with a calm precision that seemed to defy the panic pressing in around them. He was feeding the artifact a constant stream of information. It was not just the alarm song anymore. It was a live broadcast of the threat. "I am giving it the flagship's unique energy signature," Tae said, his voice steady in their helmet comms. "Its shield frequency, its engine pulse, its communication bands. I am also feeding it the data from the Ganymede strike. I am showing it the pattern. This is the entity. This is its harmful action. This is its intent." Mira monitored the approaching ships. They are accelerating. Kale is not taking any chances, or he is in a rage. He wants this over quickly. They will be in visual range in less than 30 minutes. Hyun stood between them, a bridge between the desperate science and the cold, approaching reality. He watched the artifact. It did nothing. It absorbed the data, the light on Tae's machine flickering as it processed. But the twisted black structure remained inert, a piece of dead sculpture. "Is it listening?" Hyun asked. "It is receiving," Tae corrected. "Listening implies understanding. We do not know if it understands." Captain Jun's voice crackled from the shuttle. "I am reading active targeting scans from the lead Juron vessel. They have a weapons lock on the station. They are hailing us." A new window opened on the main screen. Commander Kale's severe face appeared. He was not on his bridge now. He was in a smaller, more intimate chamber, likely his ready room. His large black eyes showed something new, a cold, focused irritation. "Liaison Hyun." Kale's translated voice was a soft, dangerous scrape. "You have a primate's understanding of courage. It is not brave to throw stones from a great distance. It is merely poor strategy. You have succeeded only in making your species end more personally humiliating." Hyun took a step toward the screen, making sure his suited figure was in view of the station's camera. He forced his voice to be flat, to match Kale's coldness. "You were told to leave. You did not listen. This is the consequence." Kale made that dry clicking sound. "The consequence? I see a frozen outpost and 3 doomed apes in suits. Your consequence is that I will reduce your station to atoms before I continue to your homeworld. Your final act will be watching me destroy your moon. A lesson in hierarchy." The transmission cut. On the sensor screen, the 10 ships began to shift formation. They spread out into a wide, flat arc, a net to surround the tiny station. The flagship, Kale's ship, took position directly in the center, at the forefront. It was a classic subjugation posture. It was also, Mira realized with a jolt, exactly what they needed. "Look," she whispered. "He is bringing them into a close ceremonial arc. For a show of force. He wants them all to have a clear view. The flagship and its 9 closest guards. All within a few hundred kilometers of each other. It was the parade of dawn formation, but on a smaller, more vicious scale. Perfect for the artifact's limited range." "Tae?" Hyun said, his eyes locked on the formation. "Now. It has to be now." Tae's fingers danced over his console. "The song is complete. The threat is identified and presented. I am initiating the final sequence. I am..." inviting the artifact to wake. He pressed a series of commands. The machine glowed brighter. A deep, subsonic thrumming began to pulse through the station's floor, so low they felt it in their bones more than heard it. It came from the artifact. On its smooth, black surface, faint lines of blue light began to appear. They traced the edges of the twisted flower shape, like veins of power coming to life. The air in the station, thin as it was, began to crackle with static that made the fine ice crystals on the desks shiver and dance. But nothing else happened. The Juron ships completed their arc. They were close enough now that the main screen's optical feed could pick them up. They were monstrous, angular things hanging in the star-dusted black like knives. Their weapon ports began to glow with a soft, deadly light. "It is powering up," Tay said, a note of desperation in his voice. "But it is not acting. It is like a guard dog that stands up and growls, but does not bite." "Why not?" Mira asked, her voice tight. "I don't know. Perhaps it needs a direct, immediate threat. Not data, an action." Outside, the lead ship, Kale's flagship, pulsed brightly. A beam of brilliant white energy lanced out, silent and terrible. It missed the station by 100 meters, striking a ridge of ancient ice. The ice did not melt. It vanished, turned instantly to superheated plasma that expanded in a silent, glittering cloud. A warning shot. The message was clear. The next one would not miss. "An immediate threat," Hyun repeated. He looked at the glowing artifact, then at the ships on the screen. The guard dog was growling at the fence line. The intruder had just kicked the fence. He made a decision. He turned to the station's manual control panel, a heavy, physical board for emergencies. He saw a large, red-covered switch labeled External Defense, Kinetic Scattershot. It was a useless system, designed to throw a cloud of small metal pellets into the path of an incoming asteroid. Against the Jurans, it would be like throwing sand. It was also a direct, hostile action. "What are you doing?" Mira asked. "Giving it a fight," Hyun said. He slammed his gloved hand down on the switch. From launchers on the station's roof, a cloud of tiny projectiles shot into the void, spraying toward the Juron formation. They would do nothing. They would not even scratch the shields of the closest ship. But for the artifact, it was the final piece of data. The station, the thing it was embedded in, had been directly attacked. The identified hostile entity had escalated from demonstration to direct assault. The reaction was instantaneous. The faint blue lines on the artifact blazed into blinding, white-hot filaments of light. The deep thrumming rose to a shriek that pierced their suits, a sound that felt like it was tearing space itself. The artifact did not move, but the space directly in front of it, in the direction of the Juron fleet, began to warp. It was not a beam or a bolt. It was as if a giant, invisible hand had reached out and pinched the fabric of reality. The starfield behind the Juron ships, visible through their formation, rippled and distorted, like a reflection in a pond into which a stone had been dropped. On the sensor screen, the readings went insane. Gravity spikes of impossible magnitude registered at a single point in space, right in the center of the Juron arc, right where Kale's flagship hung. Tay stared, his mouth open. "It's creating a point of infinite density. A momentary, artificial singularity." For a fraction of a second, a tiny black dot, darker than the space around it, appeared in the void between the station and the flagship. Then, it collapsed. The effect was not explosive. It was subtractive. The flagship and the 9 ships in tight formation with it did not blow up. They did not fracture or burn. They were simply erased. One moment they were there, monstrous and solid. The next they were gone. A perfect, circular section of space containing them was now empty. No debris, no flash of light, no expanding cloud of gas. Just nothing. The silence that followed was deeper than the vacuum. The deep shrieking from the artifact ceased. The blue light faded back to faint lines, then to nothing. The artifact was dormant again. On the main screen, the 10 red dots were gone. Only the empty arc of space remained. The other Juron ships, the ones farther back in the main fleet near the asteroid belt, still showed on the long-range scan. They had stopped moving. In the station. No one moved. No one breathed. They stared at the empty space on the screen where a quarter of the Juron pacification array had been seconds before. The only sound was the ragged sound of their own breathing inside their helmets. They had awakened the echo. And it had answered. The silence in the station was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, yes, but also the silence of a mind that has just witnessed the impossible and has no words for it. The main screen, which had been a chaotic symphony of data and threat, now showed a simple, terrible image. A wide-field optical view of the space where the 10 Juron ships had been. There was nothing. Just stars, cold and clear, as if a painter had simply lifted 10 brushstrokes of gray from the canvas. Mira was the first to move. Her hand, still in its thick glove, reached out slowly and touched the cold surface of the main console, as if to confirm it was real. She brought up the active sensor sweeps. The results scrolled. No mass, no energy signatures, no particulate debris beyond normal background dust. The ships were not destroyed. They were absent, removed from reality. Gravity has normalized, she whispered. The words a puff of fog on her helmet's interior. The singularity point. It was temporary. It existed for less than a nanosecond. Just long enough to delete everything in its field. Tay was still staring at his interface machine. All the lights were dead. The artifact behind them was once again a smooth, black, inert sculpture. The blue veins of light had vanished. It completed its function, he said, his voice hollow. The threat within its perimeter has been neutralized. It has gone back to sleep. Hyun could not take his eyes off the empty starfield. He had expected explosions, violence, a flash of terrible light. This was none of that. This was an erasure. It was clean, silent, and somehow more horrifying than any bombardment. It spoke of a power so far beyond human or Juron understanding that it treated warships like stray marks on a chalkboard, wiped away with the effortless pass of a hand. A crackle came over the comms. It was Captain June from the shuttle, his voice tight with awe and fear. Station, this is Valkyrie. Confirm visual. The targets are gone. I am reading no hostile signatures in local space. What happened? Before Hyun could answer, the long-range sensor alert chimed softly. Mira switched the view. The main Juron fleet, the remaining 62 ships that had been holding position near the asteroid belt, were now moving. But they were not advancing toward Earth. They were turning. In a coordinated, frantic maneuver, the entire fleet pivoted. Their powerful engines, which had been pushing them toward humanity's home, now flared to life in the opposite direction. They were not forming any ceremonial pattern. They were scattering, moving back along their incoming path, gaining speed with a desperation that was clear even on the sensors. They're running? Mira said, disbelief coloring her tone. A new signal appeared on the comms board. It was a wideband, unencrypted transmission from the Juron fleet. It was not in Commander Kale's voice. This voice was higher, strained, laced with a terror that translation software could not hide. People of Earth, this is Science Officer Vel of the Juron Hegemony Pacification Array. We are withdrawing. Immediately, we are activating our continuum drives and will depart your stellar system. Do not pursue. The hegemony will be notified of the protected status of your neighborhood. We apologize for our intrusion. The transmission cut off abruptly on the screen. The fleet of gray dots began to wink out, one by one, as they engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished from the solar system. Within minutes, the space near the asteroid belt was empty. The only remaining signs of the Juron hegemony were a new, molten scar on Ganymede and a perfect, ship-shaped void in the space near Sedna. The relief that washed over Hyun was so physical it made his knees weak. He had to brace himself against a chair. They had done it. They had stopped them. Earth was safe. But the feeling was quickly followed by a cold, heavy dread. He looked from the empty view screen to the silent artifact, and then to Mira and Tay. Their faces, visible through their visors, showed the same dawning realization. This was not a victory. It was a revelation. They had not used a weapon. They had triggered an alarm. And the alarm had summoned a force that removed the problem with the indifference of a hand swatting a fly. Where did that force come from? Who had built the landmine? And what happened when you proved you could trigger it? We need to go, Hyun said, his voice rough. Now. Before anything else wakes up. Mira nodded, already shutting down the station's non-essential systems. Tay carefully disconnected his interface machine, handling it as if it were now a sacred and dangerous relic. They moved quickly, without speaking. The journey back across the frozen surface to the shuttle felt longer than before. The starfield seemed to watch them, countless unblinking eyes. The silence of Sedna was no longer empty. It felt loaded, pregnant with the echo of what they had just done. The airlock of the Valkyrie hissed shut. As they removed their helmets in the warm, oxygen-rich cabin, the reality of their survival hit them. They were alive. Captain June turned from his controls, his face pale. The fleet is gone. All of them. Earth is. It's going crazy. The transmissions are chaotic. They saw the ships vanish on the deep space telescopes. Get us back to Earth, Captain, Hyun said, sinking into a seat. Maximum safe thrust. As the shuttle turned and the engines built to a roar, Hyun looked out the viewport. Sedna and the dark, silent station shrank away, becoming just another speck of rock in the infinite dark. But he knew what it held. A sign that said "No trespassing," and they had just learned how to read it. The journey home was quiet. There were no celebrations. Mira and Tay slept, the deep, exhausted sleep of mental and physical collapse. Hyun stayed awake, watching the starfield, thinking. Earth had been saved not by its own power, but by the leftover security system of a civilization so advanced they treated star systems as properties to be guarded. They had hidden behind a fence they didn't build, and they had watched as the fence electrocuted the intruder. What would the galaxy think now? The Jurans would report back. The story would spread. The young, noisy species in the yellow star system is not unprotected. They are guarded by something old and terrible. Would that keep others away? Or would it only attract the attention of those who wanted to study, or even steal the Watchmaker's artifact? And what about Earth itself? They would want answers. They would want to celebrate. They would want to use the artifact. Hyun knew with a cold certainty that it could not be used. It was not a weapon. It was a covenant they did not understand. To try and wield it would be to invite the same erasure. He closed his eyes. The image that came to him was not of the vanishing ships. It was of Commander Kale's face in that final transmission, filled with cold irritation. Kale had died because he was uncurious. Humanity had survived because Mira was curious enough to find the artifact, and Hyun was desperate enough to try and use it. But curiosity had now shown them the abyss, and they had learned that at the bottom of it, there was not a monster, but a blank, empty space where things that caused trouble were simply deleted. The shuttle hurtled toward the inner solar system, toward a home that was saved, but a future that had become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. The noise of Earth was waiting for them. But Hyun carried back a silence, the silence of 10 ships that were no longer there, a silence that he knew would haunt humanity forever. The Valkyrie shuttle did not return to a hero's welcome. It returned to a planet holding its breath. They landed at a secured military pad on Jeju Island, not to cheering crowds, but to a cordon of silent soldiers and a team of officials in sterile biocontainment suits who guided them quickly into a waiting convoy. The world had seen the alien fleet vanish from telescope feeds. The world had heard the Juron surrender and withdrawal. The world was now a chaos of relief, confusion, and 1,000 screaming questions. Hyun, Mira, and Tay were the only ones with answers, and so they were taken into silence. For 3 days, they were kept in a comfortable, isolated government facility. They were debriefed separately, then together by teams of military strategists, scientists, and grim-faced politicians. They told the story again and again. The artifact, the alarm, the erasure. They showed the data. They described the silence. On the 4th morning, Hyun was allowed to go home. A security detail drove him through the streets of Seoul. The city was alive in a way he had never seen. There were flags, celebrations in squares, people embracing and crying with joy. The word miracle was on every screen. But as he looked into the faces of the people, he saw the shadow behind their eyes. They had been ready to die. They had been saved by something they did not understand. The joy was real, but it was fragile, built on a foundation of fear. His apartment felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. He stood by the window, looking out at the cityscape, and saw not buildings, but the empty space where the Juron flagship had been. That evening, Mira came to see him. She looked tired but calm. She had brought tea. They sat in his small living room, the sounds of the celebrating city a distant murmur through the glass. "They want to go back," she said softly, not looking at him. "The council, the military, they have formed a new department, extrasolar archaeology and defense. They want me to lead it. They want to study the artifact. They want to learn how to use it." Hyun poured the tea. The steam rose in a thin, warm column. "It is not a tool, Mira. It is a signpost. We do not use a beware of dog sign to bite our enemies. We hide behind it." "They don't see it that way," she said. "They see a power. The only power that worked. They are afraid, and so they want to own the thing that caused the fear. Tae is already being pressured. They want him to rebuild his interface machine. They want to try to wake it again on command." "And will you?" Hyun asked, looking at her directly. Mira met his gaze. Her eyes were clear. "No. I will give them my data. I will tell them everything I know. But I will not go back to Sedna. I will not help them poke the guard dog. I think I will go back to teaching, to trying to understand the universe, not command it." Hyun nodded. He felt the same. The weight of what they had done was not a weight of glory, but of a terrible secret. They had shown the galaxy that humanity lived in a house with a loaded, automatic security system. Now, they had to live in that house without touching the triggers. "What will you do?" Mira asked. "I will resign from the council," Hyun said. "I will write a report, private one, for the permanent record. It will say that our greatest victory was a warning we did not create, and our only wisdom now is to heed it ourselves. We must become curious where the Jurans were not. We must learn to read the signs, not try to steal the pen that wrote them." They sat in silence for a long time, drinking their tea, listening to the distant noise of a saved world. A week later, Hyun submitted his resignation and his confidential report. It was accepted without comment. He took a position as an advisor to a small, private foundation studying peaceful interstellar communication, a field that now seemed like the most important and most hopeless in the world. One clear night, months after the erasure, he climbed to the roof of his building. The celebrations had long since ended. Life had returned to a new normal, a normal where people sometimes looked at the moon and remembered it was almost shot, where children drew pictures of strange, twisted flowers in their schoolbooks. That he looked up at the stars. They were the same stars, but he knew they were not. He knew that out there, near the frozen rock of Sedna, was a reminder. And he knew that in the offices of governments all over Earth, plans were being drawn. Some to worship the artifact, some to dissect it, some to forget it. That he also knew with a cold certainty that the watchmakers were not gone. A civilization that built such perfect, terrible sentinels did not simply vanish. They were somewhere, and they might not appreciate their old warning system being used by the new tenants. Humanity had won its first encounter with a galactic power, but it had done so by pressing a button in a dark room, a button connected to systems whose purpose and ownership were a mystery. The victory was real. Their safety was real. But it was a safety borrowed from giants, and the debt was unknown. The silence of space was no longer empty. It was filled with the echo of their warning, and the unanswered question of what, or who, might one day echo back. Hyun turned and went back inside, leaving the stars to their cold, silent watch. Down below, the city lights glowed, bright and alive and terribly young. They had been given a second chance, not to become masters of the galaxy, but to learn how to live in it. The final warning had been given, not by them but through them, and the hardest part, he knew, would be listening to it.